Hi everybody. In this video we're going to answer a kind of percent word problem which I like to call a find the original value problem. And we're going to learn about two strategies for doing that. The first strategy is what I call the equation strategy. We're going to write this equation out and then just plug in the numbers that we know and solve for what we don't know. So let me write that out again. The new value is equal to the original value plus the percent of change. And you have to keep in mind, if the percent of change is positive, if something is going up, then you'll put a positive number here. If the percent of change is negative, so something is going down, then you'll put a negative number here, and then you have plus a negative number, which is like subtracting a positive number. So original value plus the percent of change times the original value. So notice that we have the original value twice in this equation. All right, so let's read the problem here. Dom N.O. Pizza kept $285 of his prize after paying a 5% fee. How much was his prize? Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, this looks a lot like a problem that I saw in the other video that you did, Mr. Friedman. And you're right. The two problems do look similar, but there's a key difference here. In the other problem, you might remember from the other video, the $285 was the amount of money that Anita won, and then she had to pay a 5% fee, and then we had to figure out what the amount of money was that she kept after paying the fee. This time, we know the amount of money that Dom kept was $285. That was after paying the fee, so we have to figure out how much money he won to begin with. Okay, so it is a different problem here, even though if you read it quickly, you might think it's the exact same one that we did before. So let's plug in what we know here. We know the new value. The new value meaning, in this case, how much money Dom had after he paid the fee. And that is $285. So let's put that here. The original value, the original amount of money that Dom won before he had to pay that fee, we don't know that. So we're going to put an X down here where it says original value. And since original value is also over here, we also need to put an X over there. Okay? Then we have plus the percent of change. Now, in this case, he's paying a fee, or he had to pay a fee. So the percent of change is negative. His money went down from paying that fee. So we would have to put a negative 5% over here, but we're going to write the 5% as a decimal, which would be 0.05. Remember, to turn a percent into a decimal, you just take the decimal point and move it 2 spaces to the left. So that would be a 0 would go in that blank space, and then 5. So we get 0.05 there times x. So like what I said before, we have this plus negative here. Let's just rewrite that as minus, because adding negative 0.05 is the same thing as just subtracting 0.05. Okay? So now we have to solve this equation for x, and I know that this looks a little bit tricky because there are two x's here, but here's how to solve that. Remember that x is the same as 1x, so then we just have to do 1x minus 0.05x, because 0.05 times x is just 0.05x, right? So what is 1 minus 0.05? You'd be surprised how many different answers I get. So let me just show you. Do 1.00 minus 0.05. Okay, and then I can't take 5 away from 0. I can't borrow from 0. I'll borrow from the 1. That becomes a 0. Put a 1 next to that 0. That becomes a 10. Now I can borrow from the 10. That turns into a 9. Put a 1 over here. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 0 is 9. And then put the decimal here. And 0 minus 0 is 0. So now I have 285 equals 0.95x. Don't forget the x, and also don't forget the equal sign, please. A lot of students just drop the equal sign for some reason. Keep the equal sign in there. Now to finally solve for x, we're going to divide both sides by 0.95. Okay, so that cancels over here, and we get x equals, and let's see here. I'm going to use, I mean, you could do this by hand, but let's just use a calculator for it. So 285 divided by 0.95 equals exactly 300. Okay, the order that you divide in does matter. So if you tried to do 0.95 divided by 285, you would get a different answer. It wouldn't work. You have to do this divided by this. Okay, so we got 300. So Dom, he got $300 to begin with. He had to pay a 5% fee, and then he was left with $285. That's what we just learned. Let's see if that makes sense. If Dom had $300 originally that he won, what is 5% of 300? Well, to figure that out, let's multiply that by 0.05. Oops. 300 times 0.05 is 15. So his fee, the fee that he had to pay was $15. If we then subtract 15 from 300, then we will get 285. So it all makes sense. So 300 must have been the original amount of money that he won. Okay, and then the fee was 5% of the 300, or in dollars it was $15. Okay, now let's move on to strategy 2 here. I don't have a clever name for that. I'm just calling it strategy 2. So step 1, depending on the problem, add the percent of change to or subtract it from 100%. So this was a 5% fee. It's something that Dom had to pay, and therefore we're going to subtract it, because his money doesn't go up when he pays something. His money goes down when he pays a fee. So we're going to subtract that percent of change from 100%. So step 1 for strategy 2 is to do 100% minus 5%, which is 95%. And then step 2 of strategy 2 is to divide the result. So our result here is 95% written as a decimal into the original value. When I say divide into, that means I'm going to take the original value and divide it by 0.95. So the original value was, oh, I'm sorry, into, you know what I should say here, that should not say original value, I'm sorry. That should say new value. We're looking for the original value, right? So yeah, that should say new value. So the new value was 285. That's the new amount of money that Dom had after he paid the fee. The original of that amount that he got for winning some kind of contest, that's what we're looking for. So for step 2 here, we're going to do 285 divided by 0.95. And we already did that way back here, okay? And we got 300. So notice that for this strategy, it's basically the same thing as what we did over here, where we have here 100% minus 5% is 95%. That's like saying that 1 minus 0.05 is 0.95. And then step 2 is we take the new value, which was 285, and we divide it by 0.95, which is exactly the same thing that we did over here. All right, so those are 2 strategies for finding the original value. Okay, so I want to represent what's going on here visually on a number line. If you remember, in the other problem that we did in the other video, 285 was the original amount of money that Anita had won. And what I did was I put the 285 over or above 100% here, because that was the original amount of money. In this problem, the original amount of money is what I was looking for. So maybe I'll put an X over here, or I could have even put a question mark over here because that's what we had to figure out. But just like the other problem, the original amount went down by 5%. Okay, and so that was just like in the other problem where the person had to pay a fee of 5%. And then in this problem, 285 was the new amount of money after that 5% decrease. So 285 would go over here. I know that's really small. I apologize for that. Okay, but that's sort of a visualization of what's going on here. Now, the last thing that I want to do in this video is talk about a common mistake that students make all the time. So many students think Many students think they can answer a find the original value problem, treating it like a find the new value problem and going in reverse. It won't work. Why not? Okay, so what do I mean by that? There are a lot of students who think that they could answer a problem like this in this way. Let me show you. If you recall, one of the strategies for answering a find the new value problem is to multiply first. So there are a lot of students who think that they would solve this problem by doing this. They would say, well, step 1, they would do 285 times 0.05. And what would that give us? I remember because I just did the last video, that would give us 14.75. Let me just double check. Oh, 25, okay, oops. Okay, so this is their reasoning. They think to themselves, well, wait a minute. If Dom's money went down by 5%, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5% of 285 and just make it go up by that amount. So they do, well, their step 1 is to multiply, and then they say for step 2, what they do is say 285 plus 14.25. But then notice that the final answer that you would get if you do that is not 300 like it should be, like we got using both of these strategies. If you tried to do it this way, you would get this plus this would be 299.25. So it's almost 300, but not quite. Right? So again, the reasoning and I see so many students do this, please don't do it. They get a find the original value problem, and then they try to answer it by using strategy 2 of find the new value, which is they multiply the percent written as a decimal with the number that they're given in the problem, and then they just sort of try to do it backwards. So they're thinking to themselves, well, if Dom paid a fee, if his money went down, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add it over here, and then everything is going to work out nicely. But you can see that it doesn't. And the reason that it doesn't is because of what I was talking about in the other video. If you remember with the waiter and the customer, where the customer drank 40% of that glass, and then he told the waiter to increase the water in his glass by 40%, and then he was confused, like, how come my water isn't back to where it started with? If you go down by 40% and then you go back up by 40%, you don't end up where you started, actually. And it's the same thing here. If something goes down by 5%, and then your strategy is to take 5% of that lesser value and then increase it by that much, you're not going to end up where you started. All right, so to hopefully make this a little bit more clear why this does not work, you can see here I've zoomed in on the number line because I know that was pretty hard to see before. So remember, in this problem, Dom started out with a certain amount of money, and you know what? We already figured out what it was, so I'm just going to write it in there now. He started out with $300, okay? And then his money decreased by 5%. So if this is 100% here, this is 90% here, then right in the middle, that would be 95%. So his money decreased by 5%. So the new amount of money that he has is $285. Well, I know it decreased by 5%. How much is that in dollars? In other words, what is 5% of the 300 that he had originally? And I know I did this earlier in this video already, but just to show you again, I'm going to do 300 times 0.05, and that is 15. Okay, so he had $300 originally. 5% of 300 is 15, and that's what he had to pay as the fee. So his money decreased by $15, and that's why he ended up with $285. Notice that to get this 15, we had to do 300 times 0.05. We had to figure out what 5% of 300 is. But when students use this strategy, they don't realize that that's not going to work, because if they try doing it this way, then they're taking 5% of 285 instead of 5% of 300. So if they take 5% of 285, then you would only get $14.25, $14.25. Okay, because 5% of 285 is not the same as 5% of 300. So that's why this doesn't work here. If we decrease 300 by 5%, we would end up at 285. But then if we increase 285 by 5%, we wouldn't end up back at 300, because 5% of 285 is only 14.25. So we went down by 15, but we only went back up by 14.25. All right, so hopefully that's kind of making a little bit of sense why this strategy will not work when you're answering find the original value problem. But what you could do is, like we did before, we could use this where we take 100% and then we add or subtract depending on the problem, and then we take the new value and we divide it by the result that we got in step 1. But I explained that a few minutes ago already, so you can just rewind the video to watch that again if you need to. And that's it. So have a great day.